going to score under the post. JJ Williams. The Lions leap in the air.
These are the days that you'd never believe will come again.
To win for a Lion, for the Lions in a test match, is the ultimate.
Guscott drop! It's there! Jerry Guscott did go for the drop goal!
Hello and welcome to Full Contact with the Telegraph and our mini-series Brian's Lions. In the build-up to the 2021 British and Irish Lions, I've been speaking to the great and the good of Lions tours gone by to get their own unique perspective on what it means to pull on that famous red shirt. For the fourth and final instalment, as we build up to the first test between the Lions and South Africa, I'll be speaking to a man who toured with the Lions 3 times, including twice in South Africa, but had to wait until the age of 35 to make his test debut in red. Delighted to welcome the former England and 3 times Lions tourist, Simon Shaw. Hello, Simon.
How are you doing? You all right?
Can I just say before we start about this, Simon, in my opinion, is one of the most underrated players of his generation. I know he got 3 Lions tours, but he should have had many more caps and he should have started many more games. Before we get on to your own Lions experience, Simon, tell you what, can you remember what it was like when you were a young boy and you were a fan? What you felt about the Lions, what you thought about them?
Well, I was thinking about this earlier, and quite bizarrely, I was never a fan, and I say that only because I was never exposed to what the British Lions were all about, what they stood for. I'd never seen a Lions game because basically I hadn't really been introduced to rugby until I was 15, 16. So, and then obviously very shortly after that took up the game and started playing for Bristol when I was 17 and whatnot. And for whatever reason, I got sort of caught up in playing and never had that kind of experience of being a fan of the game.
When you first started, what was your first touch with it? When did you sort of think, this is what they mean?
I guess there was I remember one particular sort of build-up to a Lions series, but didn't really understand what the build-up was all about. We used to have a neighbour who was Welsh, and in 5 Nations games, they'd watch the first half of the games in separate houses. Our front doors met in a little alleyway, and they'd come out at half-time and just swear blue murder at one another for 10 minutes at half-time, and then go back into the houses. And I was like, what the hell is going on? What is this thing that they're getting so passionate about? So I knew there was obviously an immense amount of passion that existed between the home nations, and then this kind of period of a year where that all plateaued and it became a unified support of one team. But I didn't really know what it was about. Sounds odd, doesn't it? But
it does sound. You made your debut in '96, didn't you? It was a year before the '97 tour.
Yeah.
The one that was captured on video and actually exposed them to the wider world. Were you thinking, can I be a Lion? Or were you just thinking, let's just keep my England place?
It was more, there were rumours abound that I would make it on the tour. We had a successful 5 Nations as England, particularly the front 5 were sort of deemed as being the strongest of the home nations. So there was tips. I got tipped off that I'd probably make the tour. Again, I had no real understanding of what I was going into. For me, it felt like another step up from England, but another tour. I didn't really understand the magnitude of the task, or what it meant to be a Lion, or what it meant to wear the shirt. I had no understanding of that, and it's a shame. But obviously, I think subsequently that's probably what drove me to want to play more for the Lions, ultimately, and what drove me to be there 12 years later. I wouldn't say that I didn't appreciate where I was at, but I just didn't have any kind of real understanding of the history. And I think when a lot of people have said to me who played for the All Blacks, that very much, you're told what it's all about, and there's a history that's handed over to you. Whereas I don't, ceremonially, there wasn't that in the Lions. I guess it was expected that you already knew something about the Lions and you knew the history, and therefore you knew the task ahead.
I hadn't been to South Africa since I was there as a player. The biggest thing they said is have control of everything. Your training gear, your hotels, your travel, it's all your side. You keep control of everything. And that's what we did. We took all our own kit out. We took 2 lots of kit out, 2 scrummaging machines with 2 articulated lorries travelling between training so that there was always the right kit at the next venue.
We just heard from Sir Ian McGeechan there, who was embarking on his 3rd Lions tour as a coach, but his first in the professional era. What can you remember the message, being from him to the squad?
I guess the magnitude of the task ahead, which was to beat the Springboks on their home soil, which is one of the most difficult tasks in the rugby world. The physicality of what lay ahead. I guess there's endless videos and clips of Geach and Telford, talking about how important the challenge was, and it's the Everest. Everyone's heard the Everest speech. We were left without any doubt of the magnitude of the task and how difficult it was going to be. But very much he filled everyone with the utmost confidence that we could go out there and do it, and that he picked this particular squad for a specific job. All of the forwards, for example, were not picked just because they were powerhouses, but they were multi-skilled. They were able to handle the ball, and that's what was needed to have that edge over the South Africans. Yes, you needed the power and the strength, but you also needed to have the ball skills.
So you get on the tour, and I presume, or you can tell me, it's a bit different, isn't it? It's slightly different. People you've used to be battling against, some you don't know them, but you don't particularly like them from the bits you do know. And then they're your teammates, roommates, and so on. But how was that experience?
So mine, again, would be slightly different to yours, Mauro, or to many Englishmen. Being brought up abroad and being kind of expat, you're used to, mixing with a lot of nations, and particularly, growing up in Spain and Kenya, we'd have a lot of Irish, Scottish, Welsh friends, and it never dawned on me that we should dislike this folk. So I embraced it. I loved it. I actually felt I was more at home in a Lions environment than in an England environment, because I went to a couple of private schools, but when I first joined the England setup, I felt I was a bit out of my place. I didn't feel like it, especially it's school boy rugby playing for England, a lot of private school kids there. I spent most of my schooling in comprehensive schools and didn't kind of get the sort of class system and didn't feel terribly comfortable. And then when I came into the Lions environment, suddenly there's this breadth of cultures, and I loved it. Absolutely loved it.
What was your relationship like with Martin Johnson? He was made captain despite not being England captain. And I think a lot of people assumed you'd be the test pairing. Jono is his own man, shall we say, in the nicest possible way. How did you get on with him?
I got on with him fine. Look, when I first got into the England squad, he was, kind of mentor to me, always sort of made sure. He did it with all the young players within the squad. He'd always go around and sort of pat everyone on the back and make sure they were okay and, preparation for a game. I'm like as laid back as they come. So I kind of shrugged my shoulders and go, I'm all good here. So there wasn't like there was a huge amount of conversation going on. Neither of us are, those kind of guys that like to speak a lot. So, but I, had the utmost respect for him. That tour, the 97 tour, we've seen borne out, produced a lot of surprises in the test match squad, notably in the front 5. I've heard people talk about this particular tour and what can, put players to the fore and perhaps knock players back. And one thing that certainly does that is a defeat on a tour. And unfortunately, the English front 5 were part of a loss, quite a humiliating loss in the sense that we got pushed back in the scrum and we were sort of deemed to be the powerhouse of the home nation. So that led to, a bit of that, but also, Jeremy Davidson was playing outstandingly on that tour and had, again, like I said to you before, about another dimension. Lifting had just been introduced, proper lifting. Every single line-out session, I got a barrage of abuse from Leonard and Round for just being simply too heavy. I was about 22, 23 stone, and they moaned and groaned their way through every training session, which I don't think helped my cause. But I simply wasn't a player. I wasn't going to, get up and contest every line out like Jeremy was. He was a good, 3 stone lighter than me. And it proved, ultimately it proved an ace card for the Lions team at the time, because he was able to snatch, disrupt the very solid platform that South Africa normally have in that area. But that said, I don't. Outside of that, I think I played as well as I ever could have done at that time. Keith Wood at one point came up to me after, I think we played Natal, beat Natal pretty well, and came up to me and sort of patted me on the back and said, you must be pretty confident now after that performance. So, I was there was never an expectation, but I did think, I played as well as I could have done.
Famously went on to win the series, and unfortunately didn't get a chance in the test team. Having the two experiences, winning and not being part of it, was it a bit of a bittersweet experience? So how do you feel?
I'll be honest, it would have been nice to have played a part in it. There are stages to this, know as well as I do. You get the letter that first tells you you're on the squad, you're on the plane, and it's mind-blowingly exciting. The first time you get to wear the shirt, again, extraordinary. And each time you go up a level, you want more. So it's inevitable that you want to be a part of a match day, test match 20, 22, 23, whatever it was in those days. But it wasn't, those days weren't like you had the full array of players on the bench anyway. So there wasn't really a chance for, a second row to be on there anyway. So I didn't expect that, but it would have been nice to play a part in the final game. I understand why Geach and Telford decided to go the way they did, but I just felt that there was an opportunity to perhaps play more of the squad, because the test match, the series had already been won. But then again, no one should just be given the right to play for the Lions tour just because they're there. So I get it, and it, ultimately would I have been as hungry to play on future tours if I had been given that opportunity? I don't know.
What he tried to do was put a test team together early on in the tour and just give that team chance to work together. I agreed to go on because I know to go on the tour, because he asked if I'd the midweek team, and I said yes, because if the midweek team's right, then the test team is right.
Yeah.
We changed one or two things, because I asked Clive, I said, look, I want to take the midweek team down a day early and stay in the areas and go out for a drink at night. But Clive kept the others, they flew in, watched and flew out again. So they only had these certain hotels. Fast forward to the New Zealand tour of 2005. You joined the tour late, following an injury to Malcolm O'Kelly. Did you expect to go initially?
No, I was in and out of the England squad. I wasn't Clive's favourite, or cup of tea particularly. So there was no expectation on my behalf. It was a sort of a bittersweet moment when I got the call to go out, because I was, and this sort of pains me to say it sometimes, but I was genuinely considering not going on the tour, and that.
Why?
Alarm a lot of people. I just thought I felt like, and it's, this isn't a retrospective look back on the tour and go, I told you so, but I just didn't feel, I didn't have positive vibes about what the tour was going to look like, how it was going to feel. Having been there in '97, having seen what happened 4 years later, I felt like it was a wrong approach in many ways to have a squad that big, to have, two separate coaching groups, to have essentially two separate teams, not mixing and not spending the amount of time you need together. Because ultimately, a Lions tour, you have a very small amount of time to get everyone thinking and sing off the same hymn sheet. If you don't have it nailed down very, very quickly, it can all unravel. And simply by having, I entirely get why the approach was taken, because it was a new professional system way about doing things. But I just think ultimately the fixtures and the timelines were pretty much the same. So not having people, share rooms, be in each other's company as often as they should be, all that sort of stuff. I just didn't feel like it was going to work very well.
And it didn't. Indeed, it didn't work. And when Clive said that he was going to make sure that everyone got a game before the first test, I remember writing about this and saying, if that happens, there will be no chance to get anywhere near your first selection, out before the first test. And indeed, that happened. And then there were 8 changes, I think, or something like that, which means 8 mistakes. And I don't think he knew what his test team was, even on the third test, because he got into a mix. You just can't do that. It's too many people. For all the reasons you said, not just the social aspect, which is very important as a knock-on for the team aspect, but you put yourself in a situation where, selection-wise, once you've said this, I don't mind, if you want to take loads of people, fine, but they can't all play.
No.
Sorry, they can't all play. I mean, they've been professional 10 years then. What was there any big differences between 97 in terms of it being professional that stood out for you? Apart from it being a disaster, but...
Well, in the sense that, and this is my sense, not just with that particular Lions tour, but I do think there's a sense that you can be too professional. You can. I get the whole incremental gains and all that. I completely understand that, but there comes a point where relationships are far more important. You've got to look at people in the eye in the change room and understand that they've got your back, you've got their back, and if I literally barely speak to anyone on that 2005 tour, not because they're not nice people, but just because I didn't really get to know them at all.
Yeah.
Contrast that with 97 and with 2009, and most of those guys are in my phone book, and I communicate with them regularly, and it just seems to me that it went a bit too far. I mean, my first game on that tour was against the New Zealand Maori, which was deemed as a sort of fourth test. I played that game literally the day after I arrived in New Zealand.
Oh, great.
From a 24-hour flight, not knowing the line-out calls, and the line-out calls then got changed the night before that game because there was a belief that someone had, uncoded or decoded our line-out system. Now, so you can do all the professional things in the world. If one of your second rows has jumped off, has got off a flight, he's pretty key to your line-out performance, and he hasn't got a clue what's going on. Plus, he's got jet lag and shattered from a 25. There's lots of reasons why I just felt it could be a disaster. But
well, I remember Clive saying, I urge all the Lions fans to come down here because I have a feeling something special is going to happen. And he was right. It was the first time I can remember where the Lions weren't in touch in any test at all. It was one to forget, obviously, but you're 31 at that point, still not got a test cap. What was your feeling about that? Gone? Chances gone? Or because you're fairly laid back?
Yeah, I'm very laid back, but I'm kind of weirdly eternally optimistic. So, I just think, if I keep plugging away, if something good's going to come eventually, karma's going to come around the corner and give me an opportunity. And I think that belief, of always being there at the end, always having a chance, was drilled into us, since 2000 in the Wasps squad under the guidance of Warren and Craig White and Paul Stridgen and Sean Edwards, and I just felt they kept on kept the belief, I guess, within me, because I've never been a huge confidence guy. As I say, I'm pretty laid back, but always kind of felt like there's a bit of imposter syndrome. So I was, always needed sort of coaches to G me up and tell me I was good enough, rather than sort of tell me what I wasn't capable of doing or where I was weak. So they really sort of kept me going on that stance. And ultimately, when you continue to win at club level, you still think there's opportunities and chances, even if you're not playing international rugby.
The 2009 British and Irish Lions are the forwards: Alan Wyn-Jones, Wales; Paul O'Connell, Ireland; Donica O'Callaghan, Ireland; Simon Shaw, England.
12 years after being named for your first squad, you picked again, a bit older, 35, quite older. Again, South Africa. How do you feel that time?
I felt like I was going on as a sort of social secretary.
Entertainment officer.
Yeah, I couldn't quite believe it. But I thought, well, there's a role here for me. I need to think carefully about what it is. But I did feel that a part of me was certainly not a hanger-on, but I just felt perhaps that knowing how Lions tours can go wrong, and knowing how people can go off tour, and knowing that Geach and Gats and Sean were involved, and Rob Howley was involved, that they, I guess, knew that I would never give up. So in terms of,
because your form had been very, very good between the tours.
Yeah, it'd been good, but I was still thinking, God, there must be sort of younger, fitter, guys out there. But that said, I think they looked at me and said, well, his physical game is good enough to compete with the Saffers, but also he's never going to give up for that opportunity to play in the Test matches. And I think that they probably already had in mind who their Test match second row partnership was going to be, and that if there was an injury or so, then I might be in the mix. But I don't think that they anticipated me being part of that first Test match anyway. So my job was simply to try and do the best that I possibly could in each and every opportunity I had on that tour. And quite worryingly, the first game we played was slap bang in the worst possible time you could play at altitude, which was I think on the fifth day. I think if you play on the first day after you've landed at altitude, it's good. If you play about 8 days after that, it's good. If you play about 3 to 5 days, it's the worst possible time you can play, and that's when we played.
Well, don't think that was coincidental. I'm sure it was.
And I've never felt as bad on a rugby pitch in my entire life. I mean, I literally lifted my head from every scrum, and I didn't have a clue where I was. Couldn't focus, just completely in a daze. And Gats very kindly pointed out that it was probably the worst game that you'd ever seen me play. So I thought, well, that's my Test match hopes shot to bits.
You didn't get into the first Test squad. Was it something you thought, well, I don't really expect it given the form of, I haven't done myself justice, or did you hope that at some point, you've been in and around 7 Test matches, never made the Test squad? Do you think at that point all over?
First Test, I've admitted to say that I was pretty gutted that I wasn't on the bench, because each and every time I was asked to come off the bench and play a part in some of the build-up games, I wouldn't say I single-handedly turned those results round, but it did have a significant impact whenever I came on. So I did think that I deserved a spot on the bench, and added to which, I think if the scrum, for instance, started to have a wobbly in the opening encounters, that may be my opportunity to come on and kind of shore things up. Excuse the pun. And that's ultimately what happened. Probably a Test match too late. But I the moment that the scrum started to creak and there was perhaps a lack of physicality, I did feel like there was a chance in the second test. I struggled sleeping last night, so God knows what it'll be like the night before the game and the day of the games. But I'm usually pretty chilled and laid back, so the butterflies sort of fluttering around in my stomach at the moment is a very weird sensation because I don't usually have that. So hopefully that's a positive thing, and I'll just run out there and give it my all.
Well, you did get in the second test team. It was a must-win one. Can you describe your feelings when you were told? When were you told, by the way?
It was all a bit of a blur.
It wasn't on the day. It can't be on the day, can it?
No, it wasn't on the day. I think it was the evening before. I think Sean might have let the cat out of the bag by sort of giving me a nudge and a wink, or sort of when you've played that long and been around that many international squads, you get a sense anyway, don't you? I mean, you certainly know when you dropped, and
yeah.
And sometimes it's pretty obvious when you're going to get picked. So I knew, and the sort of smile was already coming across my face, pretty loud and proud. So it was, but it's still an incredible feeling when your name is announced as a test player for the Lions. So sure.
Well, we'll get on to the match itself. It's gone down as one of the most memorable test matches, that there's been, Lions test matches. What do you remember about the lead up to it and the atmosphere in the stadium and so on?
I personally, despite having said that I'm a very laid back player, it's probably one of the few times leading into a game where I literally got no sleep, and I was, the more I panicked about not having sleep, the less I could sleep. So just because it was less about me feeling like I was worthy or deserved the opportunity, more because there were a couple of changes in the scrum, and the expectations were therefore that would change everything. And as well as I do, in scrummaging, it's not always the case, and I just feared so much that I would let the side down, that I wouldn't be able to deliver on this kind of promise that. And obviously the press build it up, and the coaches are building it up, and they're all saying, well, we're going to bring Shawsey into the squad because, he gives us that physicality and blah, blah, blah. And you sort of think, Christ, can we all play it down a bit? I might not deliver. But, so it was more spending sort of 24 hours, 48 hours just in a little bit of a panic, to be honest.
Well, one of the things and the big differences is that the referee the front row properly, and Tarawih, the beast, wasn't allowed to slip his binding, go outside and ram a right shoulder up. I mean, it was obvious to me in the first test. And, I don't think, I think it was Vic's, wasn't it? I don't think that he could have done much about that, because once you step out, it's anatomically impossible. You can't keep with just a shoulder. You can't keep someone's force down once he steps outside. Well, all you feel in second row is that, you're going backwards. I mean, you had a great, you did have a great, you had a great test match. And that early exchange with Backies, what was that about?
No, well, I think, I can't recall whether it was straight off the kickoff or the first line-out drive they did, but they trundled us up the pitch, 20 metres or something. And he just, we sort of were chest to chest at some point, and he said, I thought you were the, hey, big guy, I thought you were the guy that was going to kind of come in and stop this. And I've always been that one of those players that kind of needed to be punched before they got, excited about anything or riled up, and it was just that comment. I thought, he's absolutely, he's bang on. I've not done my job first and foremost. So it added a bit of fuel to the fire, and it just set me off a bit. So.
Well, good for that. I mean, everyone remembers I was actually in Ireland watching the game. I was at Carphone Warehouse I remember the error from Rowan Agar. I remember saying in the debrief afterwards, of all the things he could have done, there were loads of things he could have done, all of which would have been okay. There was one thing that he shouldn't have done, and that's what he did. Now, obviously, he didn't do it on purpose. And I think, people forget it was a bloody long kick, was that? He was never at the given. Everyone thinks, definitely going to through. I mean, Geach told us that he knew Steyn would slot it on his home ground. What was your thoughts when the penalty went through?
Absolutely devastated, obviously. But, I feel for Rowan. I've been in situations where you come off the bench and your first focus is I've got to contribute in some way, shape or form. I've got to do something, lift the team via whether it's a tackle, whether it's a kick or whatever it is. And I think because he was part of the missed tackle in the corner, that doubled up. And Sean Edwards is forever pushed home this, don't double up on your errors. You will, when you make an error, you will inevitably want to make up for that error straight away. And then, your body's brimming with adrenaline and, almost to overload point. So you kind of have to pull yourself back. Mm. And he didn't do that. But we've all been there, and it's, unfortunately not perhaps at that level. Although, I played in a top 14 final and literally gave the same penalty away twice off a kickoff, and I stood there afterwards and thought, why have you done that? You've done exactly the same thing as you did 2 minutes ago and given another penalty away, and Toulouse have kicked it. Like sometimes you just lose control of your mind, and I think that's when sometimes people need to step in and say, look, just rein it in a bit.
I'd have rather been taken off at half time for playing poorly than to have won man of the match and lost, to be honest. I'd rather have won this game and played badly, to be honest. But that's the way it goes.
You modestly said that sort of being man of the match today doesn't mean that much to you, but I've seen you play some games for Wasps and Heineken Cups and for England. I've never seen you play as well as you play today. How much did wearing the shirt in a test match finally mean to you today?
It's difficult to say, really. I would have liked to have won today, wearing the shirt.
I hadn't quite fully appreciated the Wasps connection. Howley, Edwards, and so on. Geach. I mean, you and Geach are rare in the in this sense of having toured in '97 and '09 and Wasps. So you must know him well. And I remember he told us that he'd never seen you so upset in his time, in rugby after that test match. Is that right?
Is that right? Yeah, yeah. Look, it's one of those moments that you get caught on camera, you get reminded of it, for years and years on end. Everyone's trying to give me a hug, as Graham Simmons was trying to do on the day. But no, when you lose in that manner in a test match that could have swung it our way or could have at least extended the test match series onto the final game, it's pretty gutting. And everything I said at the time, I meant and mean now. I would have given up a lesser performance if it meant the team won. But and it goes back to that point I made earlier about each and every time you step up the ladder, you want to contribute more, and you want to be. You don't want to be just once you've got a Lions Test shirt on your back, you want to be a winning Lions Test match player, and then you want to be a series winner. Were
you surprised by the intensity? Because my knowledge of you isn't great. I do remember you. Do you remember that session where you came in for a scrimmaging session in South Africa for England, and Bayfield was pretending he was injured, and you came in and we ramped the scrummage machine right back, and then Bayfield suddenly recovered. Oh, there we are. And of course, the poisonous humour that we had in the thing. Everyone was saying, "Go away, Bayfield. We've got somebody who can scrummage properly now." Yeah. So I mean, the character you are and so on. Was it something? I mean, did it surprise you? Your
No, it doesn't, because I was just before I came on this, I was watching Repair Shop and getting blubbery at that. So no, it doesn't surprise me at all. But I probably don't let those emotions out publicly very often. Yeah. So no, I mean, people, like I said, people look at me and see a very laid back person. So perhaps don't appreciate the highs and the lows that I go through, because I'm kind of constantly on that sort of level. But yeah, when it means that much, it comes out, doesn't it?
Well, a third test, comfortable winners. You've made a winning appearance in a test match. What were your feelings about that?
Obviously elated to have done that. But it's, still, it's after a losing series, so it doesn't mean as much as it would have done. If we'd gone into that last game all square, or even a chance to draw the series. But, it's a weird one. I loved winning in a test match jersey. That game slightly frustrated me, actually, because I had as much energy in that game as I did in the first test match I played in, and I literally ran around like a nutter and saw the ball arriving at my hands multiple times, and it never did. I was literally running alongside people who could outpace me, any day of the week, and I was running alongside them thinking, give me the bloody ball. I'm free and I'm in space, and the ball never came to me. It was the opposite of what happened the previous week. I managed to get my hands on the ball quite often in that second test, but it just never came to me in the third, and that's probably what led to me sort of crumbling in a heap on top of Dupree, and apparently knee dropping him. So.
I know how hard he's worked over the last year or so. He was desperate to make the Lions. Felt in 2017 he probably wasn't at his best, and has really been exceptional in the way he's prepared for this tour. And, it was a shame that he picked up that injury, but it's great to have him back. And, we'll have that discussion about, is there a role for him, either as a starter or a bench player, or not involved next week.
Alun Jones was on that tour in 2009, similarly to yourself, still playing 12 years after, despite apparently dislocating his shoulder. Now, I'm not saying he didn't dislocate his shoulder. From what I've known, that's quite serious. I mean, I'm amazed that he's back.
I thought about this when someone first told me that this was a possibility, and I just thought, well, why would anyone entertain it? But then, I was one of those people that came back from injury very quickly, and you talk about whether it's a dislocation or not a dislocation, and it might be not a dislocation, it might be a sublux or whatever of his shoulder. Now, I tore all the ligaments that hold my AC joint together in a game in the Six Nations, and 3 weeks later played in another game. Subsequently, did the same thing to the other shoulder. The point was, it is possible, and as I say, I went into that game fully fit on the other shoulder. I might have been overcompensating the other one. That's what led to the following injury. But so it's possible. Whether or not he should come in and play a part straight away, I don't know, because where's his form, and I'm always a believer that the people that feature in the test matches, there's a percentage that should be allowed for previous form, as in historic form. But I'm a great believer in that they should be the best the best form players at the time, and have proven that on tour. This one's a slightly different one because there's not as many games, and so how do you build up that understanding of whether people are on form or not as well? So yeah, it's a really difficult one. But from what I understand of him in from a leadership role and a captaincy role, and what he can bring to the dressing room. I think there's no doubt that he would add something there.
It's going to be interesting. What have we made of the games so far? A limited number, and I obviously played, in atypical conditions. But what have you made of them?
Almost fairly typical Lions matches, as in, a bit scrappy early on, ultimately very comfortable winners in most games against, at the end of the day, lesser opposition. So there's an expectation, and all you're really looking for is the combinations, who's working well together, and form. You're looking for people who are really, really stepping it up. They've shown their worth at international level, but then suddenly, they've turned into another beast altogether. Whether it's against poor opposition or not, it still means something.
You know what it takes to tour in South Africa and to beat the Springboks. What do you think is going to be the key in the series, the Test series?
I've said a couple of times, I think it could go 3-0 either way. I think the first Test match will basically define how the rest of the Test match series goes. I think if the power game of the South Africans overcomes the Lions, I find it really difficult to believe that there's any coming back from that, because I don't think they've got a group of players who are all relatively similar. They all fill a similar role. It looks like much more of a kind of speed game squad to me than a powerhouse squad. And I think that's what they've looked to do is outrun the Springboks, move them around, hope for them to tire in the last 20 minutes, overcome them through fitness and speed. And if that doesn't work in the first Test matches, I can't see it working.
Well, if there's any doubt, the South Africa A side had probably 8 Test players in it. Maybe, we don't know, but certainly something close. And if there was any doubt as to how and what they're going to face in the first Test, they should be disabused of that. The number of times they managed to stop, and this is what happened to England, in the World Cup final. It's one thing looking at things on a video and thinking that, but you always think, well, we're better, so that won't happen to us.
Yeah.
When it's on the ground and Vermeulen on his own and De Toit on his own or the Allende on his own, bang, stopping, tackles dead and on his own wrecking things, you suddenly think, oh, this is not quite what I thought it was going to be. And hopefully they've got a bit of a taste of that, and they know trying to be Exeter and driving the ball against the line, not possibly going to work against South Africa. And therefore they need to be a bit more creative and be a bit more inventive on how you do it, when you do it, and so on. I would think, actually, given the composition of the squads and the lack of game time for them, the best way is not to... You can't dodge the physical battle because you're not able to do that. But to keep it moving around and to be inventive about where you take the ball in, when you go narrow and short, and to keep them guessing that way rather than just fronting. And one of the problems is, once you get into a physical battle, as a forward, you want to carry on, don't you? It's not like, let's just have a go and we're off there. You want to carry on and carry on. So 3-0 either way. Well, there's only... I keep saying this because I was part of it. There's only one side, Lions side, that's ever lost a first Test and won a series, and that was us in 89, and we got hammered in the first Test. And I agree with you that it will do that. Could you possibly, genuinely, do you think the Lions could win 3-0?
No. I can't see the South Africans rolling over that easily. So probably not the case. No, look, I've seen bits and pieces of what the Lions are trying to do, looking to do, moving doing lots of tip passes, lots of trying to get in behind them and then move with speed after that. I think with the South Africans, like you said, when you're in a physical battle, you need to commit to the physical battle first and foremost, and then open up to these little intricacies, because I think if you get those wrong, with a fast-moving defensive line of sizable
significant power, shall we say? Yes.
spill the ball and they'll be all over it, and you'll be jogging back to under your post. So you have to commit the South Africans to a physical battle at least early on, and ultimately if you can't come off second best if you hope to beat them. I mean, I played them in a World Cup final, and for large parts of that game, I mean, no one gave us a hope in hell in 2007 of winning that final. But large parts of that game, we took it to the South Africans, and we matched them, if not better them on a few occasions. And it was ultimately a tight game, and that's the only way you can confront the South Africans.
I've still yet to see a photograph that proves, I think it was Cueto, Mark Cueto, that his foot was actually touching the line. It was certainly on it. I mean, adjacent to it.
You're scratching scabs now.
Sorry about that. I've lost a World Cup final as well, so I know how it feels. Look, Simon, that's all we have time for. Thanks, mate. A very different point of view, actually, possibly because of your personality and also the latency with which you came into the game. I meant that when I said it at the beginning. I don't think you got anywhere near the recognition, on the number of caps that you should have done. I always thought you're an immense player, and it's been a pleasure to speak to you. Thank you.
Very kind. Very kind. Welcome. Thank you.
If you enjoyed this episode of Brian's Lions, head over to Full Contact, wherever you get your podcasts from, and hit the subscribe or register button to catch up on our previous episodes with Sir Ian McGeechan on what it takes to coach the Lions, Alex Corbisiero on breaking into the Test side, and former South African captain John Schmidt on what it's like to host the Lions. A reminder that all our regular episodes of Full Contact are available there too, including Monday's episode with Bob Skinstad. Bob, I'm really pleased to announce, will be with us for the duration of the Test series, so we'll have hopefully an informed point of view from a British person and also from a former Springbok captain. For now, we've got to go. Bye-bye.